Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Eden Eris, and today I'm gonna take y'all on a journey to connect some dots that are kind of a bit unusual, I would say. But I've been studying astrology since I was 12 years old, and I get asked a lot of questions, or there seems to be a lot of misunderstandings, or all of the above. So, if this interests you, please follow along. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing how people respond to this, but just know that I have the right and I will execute that right. If you're being rude, insulting, or harassing in the comments, your comment might just disappear. So, here we go. I have here this program that I recommend everyone if you're interested in diving deeper into the Bible. It's called eSword. It's free, and you can go through any of the books of the Bible, whether it's Greek or Hebrew. It doesn't have the Apocrypha, but that's a topic for another day, I think. Anyway, we're going to focus on the Messiah and his birth. So I look to Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Right here we have, "Now when Jesus was born," this is the King James Version, "Now when Jesus was born in the Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem." So this word for wise men is the Greek word magos. And the meaning of it says of foreign origin, a Magian, that is Oriental scientist, by implication a magician, sorcerer, and a wise man. There's a total of 6 occurrences in the King James Version. So we can go click on this one also, of foreign origin, H7248, and it says Rab Mag, a foreign word for a magician, the chief magician, the Rab Mag, a Babylonian official. Okay. So, but what we're going to focus on right here is Magos, Magi, because Magi is a Magian, an Oriental scientist. Okay, Oriental, I actually pulled it up. Or did I? Oh, well, I pulled it up on here, and look. You look at the word Orient on Wikipedia, it's this whole section. It's everything in the Middle East. All of this stuff right here. The Orient is a term for the East in relation to Europe. So, everything to the east of Europe. And then I was like, what's east of Jerusalem? And the reason I considered this is because, well, that's where we're talking about, right? There came wise men, the Magi, the Magos, from the east to Jerusalem. So we're actually not talking about the east from Europe. We're talking about the east from Jerusalem. So I'm like, okay, what's east of Jerusalem? I don't know why it's not working. Okay, there we go. Alright, it should be pretty simple. We've got the Jordan, the northern half of Saudi Arabia, and mostly Iraq. I would be willing to bet it was probably from Iraq and Iran that these men came from. It's been traditionally said that the 3 wise men had a Persian, right? Like we've always heard that. Who were the 3 wise men? They brought the 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I'm going to type in Persian because they're usually depicted wearing Persian clothing. Right? Let me see this. Biblical Magi. The biblical Magi, also referred to as the 3 wise men, 3 kings, and the 3 Magi, were distinguished foreigners in the Gospel of Matthew and Christian tradition. They are said to have visited Jesus after his birth, bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They are regular figures in traditional accounts of the nativity celebrations of Christmas and are an important part of Christian tradition. Okay, They came from the east to worship the king of the Judeans. The gospel never mentions the number of Magi. That's interesting. So most Western Christian denominations have traditionally assumed them to have been 3 in number based on the statement that they brought 3 gifts. That is true. We've made the assumption that there was only 3 because there was 3 gifts. In Eastern Christianity, especially the Syriac churches, the Magi often number 12. That's even more interesting, considering where we're going with this. The number 12 is extremely significant. Their identification as kings in later Christian writings is probably linked to Isaiah 60, chapter 60, verses 1 through 6, which refers to kings coming to the brightness of your dawn, bearing gold and frankincense. Further identification of the Magi with kings may be due to Psalm chapter 72, verse 11, may all kings fall down before him. And here we have a mosaic from the Byzantine circa 565 at the Basilica of Sant Apollinare Nuovo, Ravenna, Italy, restored during the 19th century. As here, Byzantine art usually depicts the Magi in Persian clothing, which includes breeches, capes, and Frisian caps. Okay, this is I could make a whole nother video on the Scythians and the Frisian caps and why this is showing up on our U.S. mint coins today. That's like a whole nother deep dive too. But look at that cap. Very, very specific cap right there. And we're gonna see that even more. Okay, so where did we get like the names of them? I know I've seen that like here and there in my life. Here we go. The names. The New Testament does not give the names of the Magi. However, traditions and legends identify a variety of different names for them. In the Western Christian Church, they have all been regarded as saints and are commonly known as Melchior, a Persian scholar, Caspar, also Gasper, Jasper, Jaspis, or Gathaspa, and other variations, and Balthazar, also Balthazar with an S, or a double S, or Bithisarea, a Babylonian scholar. So basically Persians and Babylonians. So it just hints even more where they came from. All right. Country of origin and journey. The phrase from the east, more literally from the rising of the sun, is the only information Matthew provides about the region from which they came. The Parthian Empire, centered in Persia, stretched from eastern Syria to the fringes of India. Though the empire was tolerant of other religions, its dominant religion was Zoroastrianism, with its priestly Magos class. So here we go with this connection again. And here in Armenian tradition, they identify the Magi of Bethlehem as Balthazar of Arabia, Melchior of Persia, and Caspar of India. Wow, that's just truly incredible. Okay, let's skip ahead to the next point I wanted to make. Because here, look, you got this, they're going right back to where we started. The Magi are popularly referred to as wise men and kings, but the word Magi is the plural of Latin magus, borrowed from Greek magos, as used in the original Greek text of the Gospel of Matthew. Greek magos itself is derived from Old Persian magus, from the Avestan magano, the religious caste into which Zoroaster was born. Wow, okay, and so then they're showing you right here the exact location in the Zoroastrian text called Yasna, chapter 33, verse 7. It says, I don't know how to speak this, but the translation is, so I can be heard beyond Magi. The term refers to the Persian priestly caste of Zoroastrianism. As part of their religion, these priests paid particular attention to the stars and gained an international reputation for astrology, which was at that time highly regarded as a science. Their religious practices and use of astrology caused derivatives of the term magi to be applied to the occult in general and led to the English term magic. The King James Version translates the term as wise men. The same translation is applied to the wise men led by Daniel of earlier Hebrew scriptures. The same word is given as sorcerer and sorcery when describing Elymas the sorcerer in Acts chapter 13 verses 6 through 11, and Simon Magus, considered a heretic by the early church, in Acts chapter 8 verses 9 through 13. Several translations refer to the men outright as astrologers at Matthew chapter 2, including New English Bible in 1961, Phillips New Testament in Modern English from 1972, 20th Century New Testament 1904 Revised Edition, Amplified Bible 1958 New Testament, an American Translation 1935 Godspeed, and the Living Bible. Okay, although the Magi are commonly referred to as kings, there is nothing in the account from the Gospel of Matthew that implies that they were rulers of any kind. The identification of the Magi as kings is linked to Old Testament prophecies that describe the Messiah being worshipped by kings in Isaiah 60 verse 3, Psalm 68 verse 29, and Psalm 72 verse 10, which reads, "Yea, all kings shall fall down before him, all nations serve him." Early readers reinterpreted Matthew in light of these prophecies and elevated the Magi to kings. By AD 500, all commentators adopted the prevalent tradition that they were kings. Later Christian interpretations stressed the adoration of the Magi and shepherds as the first recognition by the people of the earth of Christ as the Redeemer. But the reformer John Calvin was vehemently opposed to referring to the Magi as kings. He wrote, "But the most ridiculous contrivance of the papists on this subject is that those men were kings. Beyond all doubt they have been stupefied by a righteous judgment of God, that all might laugh at their gross ignorance." Wow. Okay. So, here we go. Okay, and this, I just found this random Christian page that went on to talk about Christmas. So this is, again, tying in this word. Like right here we say, Adam Clarke quotes Whitby saying that the Jews believed that there were prophets in the kingdom of Saba and Arabia who were of the posterity of Abraham by Keturah, and that they taught in the name of God what they had received in tradition from the mouth of Abraham. And this is actually what I believe today from my own research and observation. And I really just, I've thought this for over 10 years now, and I keep coming back to this same thought no matter what I research on this topic, and it's just like really impressive. It's really amazing. So when we come here to the word Magi, I studied this over 10 years ago on Wikipedia, and also Zoroastrianism on Wikipedia as well. It's very, very interesting deep dive. Okay, so the term Magi. They were priests in Zoroastrianism and the earlier religions of the Western Iranians. The earliest known use of the word Magi is in the trilingual inscription written by Darius the Great, known as the Behistun inscription. Old Persian texts predating the Hellenistic period refer to a magus as a Zervanic, and presumably Zoroastrian, priest. Pervasive throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia until late antiquity and beyond, magos was influenced by and eventually displaced the Greek goes, the older word for a practitioner of magic, and to include astronomy, astrology, alchemy, and other forms of esoteric knowledge. This association was in turn the product of the Hellenistic fascination for pseudo-Zoroaster. And pseudo means, not the same as the original, who was perceived by the Greeks to be the Chaldean founder of the Magi, an inventor of both astrology and magic, a meaning that still survives in the modern-day words magic and magician. All right, I'm going to take y'all over to Zoroastrianism, because this is where I really want to get to. I did not know anything about this growing up. I had never heard of this. This is like almost something that, unless you go out of your way to learn about, you're probably not going to know anything about. All right? So Zoroastrianism is over 3,000 years old. It's an Iranian religion and one of the world's oldest organized faiths, based on the teachings of the Iranian-speaking prophet Zoroaster. Sometimes his name is written as Zarathustra. It has a dualistic cosmology of good and evil within the of a monotheistic ontology and an eschatology which predicts the ultimate conquest of evil by good. Zoroastrianism exalts an uncreated and benevolent deity of wisdom known as Ahura Mazda, which literally translates to Lord of Wisdom, as its supreme being. Historically, the unique features of Zoroastrianism, such as its monotheism, messianism, belief in free will, and judgment after death, conception of heaven, hell, angels, and demons, among other concepts, may have influenced other religious and philosophical systems, including the Abrahamic religions and Gnosticism, Northern Buddhism, and Greek philosophy. Now, what I would say instead of this is what I keep hearing as like a repeated theme over and over anytime people are trying to educate someone on what Zoroastrianism. It's almost like they just keep wanting to say it predates Judaism and Christianity. Like it's almost like they're trying to say like it was first. This is older, and so they all just copycatted from Zoroastrianism. And I'm here to say I actually don't like that people put it in that kind of a category or label, because I would venture to bet, and the way that makes sense from what I've studied, is that Zoroaster was just a descendant of Abraham, just like we just saw that other people believe the same thing. I believe he was just a descendant of Abraham, and he's passing on the exact same belief from Abraham. It's the same. So it's not that it was first. It's not that the other ones copied. It's they all had a common origin, which was Abraham. Abraham had many sons and daughters, and they dispersed, and they carried the knowledge that their father had given them. And this, I have to say, I feel like this was a man that truly loved his father. Okay, that's making me actually tear up a little bit, because when you really realize it, like, let it just sink in. What if you were this man, Zoroaster, and let's say it was his great grandpa, Abraham. I don't know. I haven't looked into the chronological order of like how old he would have been. Nobody even really knows for sure. But let's just, for the sake of this, consider that maybe he was the grandson of Abraham. And your father just really admired his father and told you everything, to the point where, like, on his deathbed, he's like putting it into your mind, like, this is really important. You must teach everybody this. You must live this way. Be good and seek after the truth and wisdom and stay away from demons. And there's only one God, and he's the Lord of wisdom. And you'll see all of these other, there's too many similarities that I don't believe in. I've never believed in coincidences. I don't think that's a thing. There's too many coincidences that it's not a coincidence. This is an Abrahamic religion. I truly believe that. And I believe that this man was just so passionate about it and inspired so many people to carry on this tradition. And here we are today. And the only reason why there's ever any differences in the slight little changes and the slight little differences is because that's just, as they say, human nature. If anyone has ever played the telephone game, you know that you could start off, like, okay, if you don't know what that is, you can have like a line full of people, let's say 10 to 15 people. And you start at one end of the line, and someone is supposed to whisper a phrase in the ear of the person next to them. So they could say something like, the sun is always shining. And so they're supposed to whisper it to the next person, and the next person, the next person, the next person. And what ends up happening is the translation of what someone was saying gets so far lost from the original that by the time it gets to the other person, they're saying a completely different phrase. They're saying the dog is blue. Okay, I think that's more accurate of what has happened with this. I don't understand why someone could look at this. Like, let's say you're a Bible follower and you love it. Maybe you're Torah, maybe you're Christian, and you look at this and you go, oh, they're calling God Ahura Mazda. Well, that's not my God's name, and so this is satanic and evil. Or they're not worshiping the way that I do, and this is silly, and it's nonsense, and this is pagan, and blah, blah, blah. And I already know there's going to be people doing that. There's going to be people saying that. I would just say, if you love the truth, it won't offend you. If you love the truth, and you seek the truth, and you really want to find the truth is going to be, you know, you're just going to be attracted to the truth. Like, it's just going to hit you, and it's going to be like, wow, you know, there's something here. There's something to this. I don't know. Some people will get it and some people won't. But for the people that really want to get it and they're interested, let's continue on. Because I'm going to show y'all like so many of the similarities. It's crazy. Even today, I found even more. Every time I look into Zoroastrianism, what they believe, how they believe, it's not perfect. It's not like exactly lining up. It's not 100%, but it's so close. And if you compare it to like any other religion on earth, it's the closest to what the Bible goes by. It's just got slight like differences. But like I said, the slight differences could be because we're playing the telephone game. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of years. I don't think anyone has it exactly perfect by now because we're all just doing the best we can. Alright, so let's continue on. I'm going to skip about like the dates and stuff. Anybody can just pause it and read that if they want to. Okay, the most important texts of Zoroastrianism are those contained within the Avesta, which includes the central writings thought to be composed by Zoroaster known as the Gathas, that define the teachings of Zoroaster and which are poems within the liturgy of worship, the Yasna, which serve as the basis for worship. The religious philosophy of Zoroaster divided the early Iranian gods of the Proto-Indo-Iranian tradition into emanations of the natural world as Ahuras and Devas, the latter of which were not considered to be worthy of worship. Okay, the latter, look at that word, Devas, aka Diva, that's where Diva comes from, Deva, okay? That's also, I think, connected, that's a word that you can connect to India also, that word Diva. All right, the latter of which were not considered to be worthy of worship. We're not supposed to worship the Devas or Divas. Zoroaster proclaimed that Ahura Mazda was the supreme creator, the creative and sustaining force of the universe through Asha, and that human beings are given a choice between supporting Ahura Mazda or not, making them ultimately responsible for their choices. Though Ahura Mazda has no equal contesting force, I like that it says that right here because I saw some other thing that was trying to say that Zoroastrians believe that the evil is just as on an equal level as the good force. And that is actually not true. That's not what they believe. Ahura Mazda does not have an equal contesting force. The Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit and mentality, which we would say is like Satan, the adversity, whose forces are born from Akamana, evil thought, is considered to be the main adversarial force of the religion, standing against Spenta Mainyu, creative spirit and mentality. Middle Persian literature developed Angra Mainyu further into Ahriman, advancing him to be the direct adversary to Ahura Mazda. Additionally, the life force that originates from Ahura Mazda, known as Asha, which is truth and cosmic order, stands in opposition to Druj, falsehood and deceit. Ahura Mazda is considered to be all good with no evil emanating from the deity. Ahura Mazda works in Geti. Ahura Mazda will ultimately prevail over the evil Angra Mainyu, at which point reality will undergo a cosmic renovation called Frashokereti, and limited time will end. Listen to that. Limited time will end. What does that mean? That's just a different way of saying eternal life will begin. Eternity. The limitation on time will end, so it will become unlimited. In the final renovation, all of creation, even the souls of the dead that were initially banished to or chose to descend into darkness, will be reunited with Ahura Mazda in the Kshatra Varya, meaning best dominion, being resurrected to immortality. In Middle Persian literature, the prominent belief was that at the end of time, a savior figure, known as the Seosheant, would bring about the Frashokereti, while in the Gathic text, the term Seosheant, meaning one who brings benefit, referred to all believers of Mazda Yazna, but changed into a messianic concept in later writings. Zoroastrian theology includes foremost the importance of following the threefold path of Asha, revolving around good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. There is also a heavy emphasis on spreading happiness, mostly through charity, and respecting the spiritual equality and duty of both men and women. Zoroastrianism's emphasis on the protection and veneration of nature and its elements has led some to proclaim it as the world's first proponent of ecology. The Avesta and other texts call for the protection of water, earth, fire, and air, making it, in effect, an ecological religion. It is not surprising that Mazdaism is called the first ecological religion. The reverence for Yazatas, divine spirits, emphasizes the preservation of nature, and then it lists the actual locations in the scriptures. However, this particular assertion is limited to natural forces held as emanations of Asha by the fact that early Zoroastrianism, oh my God, by the fact that early Zoroastrians had a duty to exterminate evil species, a dictate no longer followed by in modern Zoroastrianism. Whoops. Zoroastrianism is not entirely uniform in theological and philosophical thought, especially with historical and modern influences having a significant impact on individual and local beliefs, practices, values, and vocabulary, sometimes merging with tradition and in other cases displacing it. The ultimate purpose in the life of a practicing Zoroastrian is to become an Ashavan, a master of Asha, and to bring happiness into the world, which contributes to the cosmic battle against evil. The core teachings of Zoroastrianism include following the threefold path of Asha, Humata, Huksta, Huvarshta, literally translates to good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Practicing charity to keep one's soul aligned with Asha and thus with spreading happiness. The spiritual equality and duty of men and women alike, being good for the sake of goodness and without the hope of reward. Practices. The religion states that active and ethical participation in life through good deeds formed from good thoughts and good words is necessary to ensure happiness and to keep chaos at bay. This active participation is a central element in Zoroaster's concept of free will, and Zoroastrianism, as such, rejects extreme forms of asceticism and monasticism, but historically has allowed for moderate expressions of these concepts. In Zoroastrian tradition, life is a temporary state in which a mortal is expected actively to participate in the continuing battle between Asha and Druj, that is good and bad. Prior to its incarnation at the birth of the child, the Urvan, soul of an individual, is still united with its Fravashi, personal or higher spirit, which has existed since Ahura Mazda created the universe. Prior to the splitting off of the Urvan, that's the soul, the Fravashi participates in the maintenance of creation led by Ahura Mazda. During the life of a given individual, the Fravashi acts as a source of inspiration to perform good actions and as a spiritual protector. The Fravashis of ancestors, cultural, spiritual, and heroic, associated with illustrious bloodlines, are venerated and can be called upon to aid the living. On the fourth day after death, the Urvan is reunited with its Fravashi, whereupon the experiences of life in the material world are collected for use in the continuing battle for good in the spiritual world. For the most part, Zoroastrianism does not have a notion of reincarnation. There's no way I'm going to be able to pronounce that name. Followers of Imi Krishnum in India believe in reincarnation and practice vegetarianism, among other currently non-traditional opinions. Although there have been various theological statements supporting vegetarianism in Zoroastrianism history and claims that Zoroaster was vegetarian. In Zoroastrianism, water, Eban, and fire, Atar, are agents of ritual purity. That just sounds like Judaism and Christianity. And the associated purification ceremonies are considered the basis of ritual life. In Zoroastrian cosmogony, Water and fire are respectively the second and last primordial elements to have been created, and Scripture considers fire to have its origin in the waters, which conception see apam napat. Okay, we'll go to that some other day. Both water and fire are considered life-sustaining, and both water and fire are represented within the precinct of a fire temple. Zoroastrians usually pray in the presence of some form of fire, which can be considered evident in any source of light, and the culminating rite of the principal act of worship constitutes a strengthening of the waters. Fire is considered a medium through which spiritual insight and wisdom are gained, and water is considered the source of that wisdom. Both fire and water are also hypostasized as the Yazatas, Atar, and Anahita, with worship hymns and litanies dedicated to them. A corpse is considered a host for decay, example of Druj, which was evil. So consequently, Scripture enjoins the safe disposal of the dead in a manner such that a corpse does not pollute the good creation. These injunctions are the doctrinal basis of the fast-fading traditional practice of ritual exposure, most commonly identified with the so-called Towers of Silence, for which there was no standard technical term in either Scripture or tradition. Ritual exposure is currently mainly practiced by Zoroastrian communities of the Indian subcontinent in locations where it is not illegal, and diclofenac poisoning has not led to the virtual extinction of scavenger birds. Other Zoroastrian communities either cremate their dead or bury them in graves that are cased with lime mortar. The Zoroastrians are keen to dispose of their dead in the most environmentally harmless way possible. Man, I relate to that. I actually often do not like the idea of how we bury the dead with like cement. That's kind of a topic that I've brought up here and there for the past couple of decades, and me and my husband agree on that. We want to just be buried where we can just kind of like decompose properly and like turn back into soil. But, you know, we also don't want to like pollute. Okay. Dana, din in modern Persian, and meaning that which is seen, is representative of the sum of one's spiritual conscience and attributes, which through one's choice, Asha is either strengthened or weakened in the Dana. Traditionally, the mantras, spiritual prayer formulas, are believed to be of immense power and the vehicles of Asha and creation used to maintain good and fight evil. Dhyana should not be confused with the fundamental principle of Asha, believed to be the cosmic order which governs and permeates all existence, and the concept of which governed the life of the ancient Indo-Iranians. For these, Asha was the course of everything observable, the motion of the planets and astral bodies, the progression of the seasons, and the pattern of daily nomadic herdsman life, governed by regular metronomic events, such as sunrise and sunset, and was strengthened through truth-telling and following the threefold path. All physical creation was thus determined to run according to a master plan, inherent to Ahura Mazda, and violations of the order, Druj, were violations against creation, and thus violations against Ahura Mazda. This concept of Asha versus Druj should not be confused with Western and especially Abrahamic notions of good versus evil, for although both forms of opposition express moral conflict, the Asha versus Druj concept is more systemic and less personal, representing, for instance, chaos that opposes order, or uncreation evident as natural decay that opposes creation, or more simply, the lie that opposes truth and goodness. Moreover, in the role as the one uncreated creator of all, Ahura Mazda is not the creator of Druj, which is nothing, anti-creation, and thus, likewise, uncreated and developed as the antithesis of existence through choice. You know what? That does sound like it goes along with the God of the Bible, because he is all good and he's all light. So what darkness is the absence of light. And it's not the opposite of light, it's the absence of it. And bad, or let's say evil, is the absence of good. And you see this concept even in Torah communities, and I mean, I've gone to like church and Torah communities, and they've said the same thing. So I don't know why they're saying it's not to be confused with Western and Abrahamic notions of good versus evil. It sounds exactly what I've come to hear other people believe, and I believe too. It sounds the same. Okay. In this schema of Asha versus Druj, mortal beings, both humans and animals, play a critical role, for they too are created. Here in their lives, they are active participants in the conflict, and it is their spiritual duty to defend Asha, which is under constant assault and would decay in strength without counteraction. Throughout the Gathas, Zoroaster emphasizes deeds and actions within society, and accordingly, extreme asceticism is frowned upon in Zoroastrianism, but moderate forms are allowed within. Central to Zoroastrianism is the emphasis on moral choice, to choose the responsibility and duty for which one is in the moral world, or to give up this duty and so facilitate the work of Druj. Similarly, predestination is rejected in Zoroastrian teaching, and the absolute free will of all conscious beings is core, with even divine beings having the ability to choose. Humans bear responsibility for all situations they are in and in the way they act toward one another. Reward, punishment, happiness, and grief all depend on how individuals live their lives. Okay, here's something that with even divine beings having the ability to choose, see, that ties into the fallen angels. That the heavenly beings that some of them turned to Druj, you could say. That even they had free will. I don't see how this is a separate religion. I'm just trying to be honest. I don't think it's separate. I think it's the same one. They just have different words for the same concepts, and that over time the traditions, you know, are slightly different, but the meaning behind them, the reasons, like it's so similar. I can tie this all in with the scriptures. I was hoping to get to where the word Magi ties into Zoroastrianism, because I'm not seeing it here. They must have changed a lot of this since I first read it, because I remember when I was first reading about Zoroastrianism and I was reading about Magi, I could not believe when it actually what it actually explained, and I'm not seeing it here and I'm not seeing it on the other one. It actually said that Zoroastrians do not believe in magic practice, like sorcery, things like that. And they don't believe in polytheism, right? Like having multiple gods. They actually believe that that's evil. They believe that I remember, and I'm like sad that I can't find where that is, because I remember reading that they actually believe if you're worshiping these multiple deities, that they're actually demons. And I was like, well, that's what I think. I think that, you know, like, for instance, you got these pharaohs that have green skin in Egypt, like Osiris, and they want to be worshipped like a deity. I think that was just Satan inhabiting him. And Satan was a snake, so it makes sense he would have green skin in the form of a man. And Satan wants to be worshipped like a god. So when he inhabits an evil person's body, he turns them into a narcissist, basically, because he wants it to be all about him and he wants to be worshipped. They just changed so much of this into a lot of, like, I don't know, they made this to is so long-winded about a lot of nothing. It's like saying a whole lot of nothing. I don't think it's properly describing the beliefs. Okay. Let's go on to this. I found this very interesting. So I found this video.
In this room, just outside of Toronto, Canada, sits one of the world's most religious symbols. This fire represents a fire that has been burning for 2,500 years. One of the oldest religions on the planet, it has influenced Judaism, Islam, and even Christianity. About the history?
Well, we were founded about 3,500 years ago in ancient Persia, which is now Iran. Our god is the god of wisdom, Ahura Mazda, and our prophet's name is Zarathustra. Apparently, Ahura Mazda came down on him and said, well, I'm Ahura Mazda, and I'm going to enlighten you with this knowledge about this world, and I'm going to guide you to live your life through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And that's Zoroastrianism.
You may have never heard of Zoroastrians, yet they were the dominant religion on Earth from 600 years before Jesus Christ to 600 years after his death.
Okay. One other thing that I was not seeing is with the term Magi, it came from Zoroastrianism. But the original context of the word Magi had nothing to do with practicing magic. In fact, they also thought witchcraft and sorcery and divination and all that stuff was evil. They actually believed that stuff was evil. However, Magi originally was a Zoroastrian term that just meant astrologer. That's it. It meant astrologer. Maybe it could have also tied in with alchemy. I don't know. But that's a big difference if you think about it, because now the word has all these other extra things lumped together with it, and we think of the word magic as evil. But the original term Magi only meant astrologer, and it was a Zoroastrian term, and they actually reject sorcery, like to do something where you're like mixing potions and you're trying to like poison people, or as you can tell, like if you would try to do anything evil, thought, deed, or whatever, then that's not being a Zoroastrian. So why would this term Magi and its connection to Zoroastrian have anything to do with doing modern day witchcraft, which is really evil? You know, like, it's just not the same. It's not the same as this idea of magic. And then you always hear people that study magic and they want to sound like really, oh, they're really deep into the occult and like they know their stuff. So they'll say, and it's magic with a K. Okay, all that stuff is just dumb. Sorry. But, you know, I went there and did all that when I was like in middle school, and it's garbage. It's crap. It's trash. Okay. And I just have to say, like, I agree with the Bible as the word of truth, the word of God, and I call God Yahuwah, which is a name that means who was, who is, and who always will be. And Zoroastrianism, I do not think goes against my beliefs, knowing what I know about the Bible. I think it's just a branch of it's just passed on from Abraham. Just like what we know now today as the sacred scriptures, like it was just a different descendants passing on these teachings. I want to show y'all that in their temples they have these fire temples. Okay, they're gonna show you the priests wear these face masks. And the purpose of it is to keep the spit from their mouth going onto the sacred fire. That's literally it. So
because if you just see it for the first time, it looks like 8
the women have
surgeons
head
in an
coverings.
emergency room. It's pretty trippy.
It turns out that these white-faced coverings represent
Here's the
purity.
fire.
The idea is to block the possibility of unpure saliva from landing here on this fire, the most sacred element of Zoroastrianism. The sandalwood being burned represents the good attributes in life, and the fire it ignites is a symbol of warmth, energy, and divine purity, carrying.
Okay, this one weirded me out because sandalwood, a very specific brand of sandalwood, is my favorite incense. And I don't like all the sandalwood fragrances that I've come across. Only specific sandalwood fragrances, they are my favorite. So to find out that that's actually what they're burning for incense, I love it already. That like made me even
its
happier.
energy as a messenger up to the only Zoroastrian god, Ahura Mazda.
And I want to point out that Ahura Mazda is a title. When you realize what that name breaks down to, it means the Lord or God of wisdom. That's a title. And to me, I feel like people in the Torah community or in the Christian community would be like, oh, well, that's not the name of my God. My God's Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahuwah. And it's like, guys, don't y'all realize that out of your same mouth, you're probably saying, you're calling him Lord God or the Lord. You're calling him, that's for the Christians. Or if you're a Yahweh, Judaism influenced believer, you're gonna say Adonai on occasion or El Shaddai, and same for Yahuans. Sometimes they call him Ahaya, Asher, Ahaya, or something like that. So you've got all these different names, but they're just like sort of like a title of who he is. Like we could say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's very specific of which God you're talking about, but that's not his name. His name is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just like they're calling their God the God of wisdom. How is that any different from saying the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Just because they're saying wisdom instead of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it's the same thing. I'm just like kind of amazed by that, because I feel like so many people would get hung up on the fact that they're calling him sorry, I'm butchering it. I already forgot what it was. Ahura Mazda. Sorry, I messed that up. They're calling it that, and I feel like so many people would get so hung up on that and be like, that's a different God. That's not my God. This is paganism, and this is blasphemy, and you shouldn't be looking into this or whatever. But if you can just like rightly divide this, if you can rightly discern this, eat the meat, spit out the bones, like see it for what it is, it's really interesting.
Another thing that's pretty wild is these guys are praying in a Middle Eastern language that's been defunct for...
Okay, this is
Zoroastrian
interesting.
community.
These are those
Not the
rhombohedron
commercial.
crystals.
Wow, you don't look like a priest.
No, it's because I'm pretty young.
How old are you?
I'm 16 right now. The way it works in Zoroastrianism is that a boy should become a priest before he reaches puberty. So it's around the age of 11 or 12.
Believe it or not, young priests like Rashad can officiate everything from wedding ceremonies and funeral processions to Zoroastrian coming-of-age ceremonies.
How can an 11-year-old have enough wisdom to counsel a whole community?
I think it's more about building that wisdom, just building with the community.
Isn't that interesting? At 11 to 12, they're considered, they didn't put it in these terms, but we've always heard this. And it's almost like this unwritten law that everybody knows, but nobody knows where it really came from. This concept of 12 is the age of accountability. And I remember in my own life, 12 was not only the time where when I was 12 years old, I stumbled across astrology. Literally, my mother had this astrology book by Joanna Woolfolk, and it was called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need. And it was this thick, and it had a purple, dark royal purple cover on it. And I literally stubbed my toe on it in her bedroom. It was on the floor, and I don't even remember what I was in there for. And I picked it up, and I didn't know anything about astrology. I didn't know my sign. I didn't know sun signs. I didn't know anything. And the book said it had this little tiny star in the corner, and it said that it could teach you to do your own chart in 5 minutes. And that kind of like piqued my interest, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I'll look into this. It's like over 500 pages or so, and I read the whole entire thing. And I did my chart, and the first time I did my chart, it was like I had a mixture of feelings, because I was like, wow, this just described me better than I could describe myself. And not only that, it said some very interesting things. And not only that, I don't know if it's like a general interpretation that could just apply to everybody. So then I really wanted to start doing all my family's charts. I wanted to see, does their chart say the same thing, so that I could just dismiss this as hullabaloo, because all the charts say the same thing, just in different words, and it's really flattering, so it's easily, misleading. But when I started doing all my family members' charts, it was describing them like so accurately, so perfectly. And I remember just thinking, this is a book. This book doesn't know me or my family members. How could a book written by someone that doesn't even know us at all, how could it be so accurate? How could it just pinpoint all of us just exactly who we are and our personalities and the things that we've gone through in our lives? So that hooked me. And from that point on, I wouldn't shut the heck up. I was talking about astrology to anyone and everyone. It was my favorite topic. And I think now that I am a high-functioning autistic female, and I'm looking into getting actually diagnosed and tested. But it makes a lot of sense. Astrology was my favorite topic in the autistic community. You would say that was my special interest. I've done over thousands and thousands of charts. I would make these accounts on astro.com, and I would add so many people, and it would tell me that I reached the limit. You could only add 99 or 100, I think. You could only add 100 people to an account, so I would have to open multiple accounts. And then I started downloading all these programs and softwares and stuff, and I would test out everything on it. I would test out heliocentrism, geocentric progressions, just play around with all sorts of different things. And but that's enough content for like a whole nother video. I've studied the charts of celebrities and serial killers and just strangers out and about. I've done so many charts for so many different reasons and so many different people. I've even done the charts of nations. Like I've looked into the charts of England, and I've looked into the charts of America, because America was founded in July 4th, 1776. So that puts it under a sun sign of Cancer, and all the attributes that you would apply to a Cancer sign really work for America as a whole. If you had like to describe America, it really does seem like a Cancer sign. Big boobs, overweight, loving their motherland, their homeland, very patriotic, loving food and family, protective. Okay, we've got all these gun rights, so very protective. Cancer, the crab, has the claws and is very clingy and possessive. But Cancer rules over mothers, women, fertility, just family. And you think about motherhood, you develop your breasts so you can feed your babies. You develop wide hips. You put on fat because it's necessary to carry a pregnancy, healthily. So all of these things you can actually describe Americans as, emotional, okay, very easily swayed by emotional sensationalism. That's all we have, like all over the news and the media. It's always trying to persuade us through our heartstrings and our emotions and moods and feelings. Everything's feeling based here, and everybody, it's like expected that you're supposed to be very emotionally tied to whatever stance that you take, politically or religiously. You have to be very passionate and emotionally charged by it. And then also here we have the sensitivities, okay? Like everyone here is easily offended. Like I could say that this is all a Cancer. This entire nation of the United States of America is a Cancer sign. So, anyway, that being said, yeah. Where am I going with that? I studied so much, so many charts. I read over 52 astrology books. I had 52 astrology books. And then these Christian people just kept telling me it was evil. I needed to repent from it. They kept pointing me to the chapter in Deuteronomy that talks against fortune telling and divination. But it didn't say astrology in there. And so then I was just like kind of conflicted and confused. Because what I had actually found in my experience experimenting with astrology was that it was just so accurate that to me anything that perfect had to come from divinity. It had to be divine. And I felt like our personalities, when we're looking at a personality chart, what we're actually seeing is the formula of our personalities. It's no different than if we draw up an algebraic formula to describe something that we actually see in the natural world. So it's just a different, it's like the mathematical and scientific formula for your personality. That's what we're seeing on a piece of paper when we map all the stars and their influence on who we are. That to me just seems like the only one that designed it and gets all the credit is the Heavenly Father. And not only that, then I started going by scripture. A lot of people are familiar with Psalm 19 verse 1, but I dare you to go a step further and read verse 2 because it's very telling. It talks about that day by day pours forth speech and night after night reveals knowledge. Okay, there's knowledge and speech given to us in the stars, and we're supposed to be watching the stars. We're supposed to be paying attention to them. All right, so right now they're at this Navo. Let me hear how they pronounce it again. I forgot how they pronounce this. It's a rite of passage.
Wow, I haven't danced that much since my bar mitzvah.
You know what?
What?
I think you should see what a Zoroastrian bar mitzvah looks like.
What's a Zoroastrian bar mitzvah?
Well, it's a little different.
Yeah.
But it's a Zoroastrian coming of age ceremony, and it's called a navjot. It's
Navjot.
when a young
I was
Zoroastrian
butchering it,
finally
sorry.
becomes a pure Zoroastrian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sweet. Let's go.
She's got
On
a
the
head
next
covering
stage of
again.
my Zoroastrian journey, Janai was going to take me into this pretty modern-looking suburb to witness one of the world's most ancient religious ceremonies. It's called a Zoroastrian pre-Navjot. Now, it's kind of like a baptism, and I've been invited to attend. And it turns out that Navjots have taken place for well over 3,000 years, all over the world. Pre-Navjots begin when a Zoroastrian priest is invited to come into the home of those who will be brought into the religion. In this case, these young girls. The priest will lead these girls through a series of hymns and prayers that they've been studying for months, even years. Next, the children will go upstairs and receive a holy purification bath called a nan. Then, they'll get changed into their traditional dresses.
Wow, that was really cool.
This
So,
is
did
awesome.
you have this as well?
Yeah, I had it when I was 9 years old, and I had my navjot in India. It's entering a religion. It makes you accountable for your own actions, your own deeds now.
Accountable. See, the age of accountability is at 12. You know what? This is also reminding me, I forgot. This is where I was going with it. So the men, as boys, when they're about 11 or 12, they go into priesthood training. Now, think about that. Doesn't that make sense then why the Messiah went to the temple at age 11 and 12 and was baffling the minds of the men in the temple? Now it's making sense. And here's food for thought, okay? Here's food for thought. These wise men from the east, these Magi that were probably Zoroastrians, how is it that they would have a knowledge of a Messiah? Oh, that's right. Zoroastrianism has a Messiah in their belief system. How is it that they would know that there was a Messiah, that they would be following the stars, which actually has to do with astrology? So they were Magi, they were astrologers. They followed the star and they knew that there was a prophecy of a coming Messiah, and they would have the frankincense, the gold, and the myrrh to give to him. Now it gets even crazier. For those of you who have actually read the book of the life of Adam and Eve, it tells you that Adam and Eve had the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh in the cave of treasures, and that when Adam died, he gave specific instructions to his children that he prophesied to them that there would be a day where the whole earth was flooded and that only 8 souls would be saved on a boat. He literally tells this to Seth and all of the children that were present and the grandchildren and such. And he tells him, the man that is getting on that boat, he needs to take my body and the gold, frankincense, and the myrrh and put it on that boat to survive the flood. Okay, let's suppose that is true. Let's suppose that actually happened. Can you really wrap your mind around the fact that, okay, let's also say that the ark landed on Mount Ararat, okay, and let's suppose it had Adam's body on it with the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh from the Garden of Eden, and that same exact gold, frankincense, and myrrh passed down through all these generations to the Zoroastrian Magi's who knew the prophecy of a coming Messiah, and they followed the stars. They watched the stars as stargazers, star watchers, and they combined the stargazing with the knowledge of the scriptures, the knowledge of the prophecies of a Messiah, and they carried that same gold, frankincense, and myrrh from Adam to the Messiah. Wrap your head around that. This is cool stuff. This gets me excited.
I'm a pure Zoroastrian now. I have to really, really keep in mind what about my thoughts, my words, my deeds.
So anybody could have it at any age?
Well, they prefer to have it before they hit puberty, I guess from the age of 7.
You know, and that makes sense to me to do this before you hit puberty because you're more pure. I really believe, I can see why they would find this age so sacred. Because I look back at my own life and I feel like when I was 12, that was like me at my most authentic. In fact, I've had this conversation with my best friend all the time. I always tell her that I think as an adult, what we should do is go back to who we were at the age of 12. Remember our favorite things, remember the way we used to dress, remember the way that we used to talk, and just everything about who we were. That's our most authentic self. And that I think that what can happen is people stray from it because they want to be more like the world, or the way that maybe people made fun of them, or someone told him you should dye your hair this color, or you should wear this kind of clothing, or you should listen to this kind of music. And somewhere we got lost. We lost that purity, that innocence, and the spirit of like who we really are and our authentic self at 12. And a lot of times it seems like something major or traumatic can also happen to people at the age of 12. There's just something about that age that really impacts people. And I think this is actually incredibly amazing that they would recognize the importance of turning these precious, innocent children at the age of 12 over towards keeping their thoughts pure, keeping their words pure, and keeping their deeds pure. I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see how anyone could say something evil about that. Because I know that a lot of times Christians will argue that, no one's perfect. We're not going to get into heaven by our deeds. I see this argument all the time, even against Torah community, where we're promoting that we should follow the instructions for how to live a good life and how to be a good person. But the Christian idea is, well, we don't have to worry so much about that because Jesus died for us and we're under grace right now. But I think that people forget or sometimes you can lose sight of things. It's very simple. It's like, you, even if your bad deeds are covered and that it's okay if you slipped up a couple times, it's not an excuse to not try harder to think pure, speak pure, and act pure. It's not an excuse to just ignore that we should all be striving to do that. And so I actually do not find anything wrong with anyone trying to say we should behave more righteous, we should think righteous, we should talk righteous, we should just try and strive for being better and better and better. Like, how could anybody ever say, well, just give up trying to be better, who cares, nobody can do it, it's impossible? I feel like that's Satan talking. Like, that's something that Satan would say. I mean, if you just really like think about it, that sounds like him, that he would just say like, who cares, don't even bother trying, just give up, it's useless, it's hopeless, there's no point in even trying to be perfect or do good. It's, you know, I don't like that attitude. I don't like that concept, and I don't want to live that way. I want to try and be a good person. I'd rather try. I'd rather die trying. Even if I fail, I'd rather die trying. So anyway, that's my opinion. I love this. They have like their own, there's a water purification. So water's important, fire's important. Okay, here's something really interesting too.
Young girls will receive a special undergarment.
The undergarment is called a sadra.
Sadra.
A sadra. I have one right here. But this is the basic kind that you're supposed to wear every day. Yeah. That's for a man, and this is for a woman.
Okay.
We have a pocket on our sadras. This is a gariban.
Gariban.
Yeah, the gariban.
Yeah, a gariban.
A gariban.
That's a really small pocket.
It stores your good deeds.
Wow. Now, why is it so small? I would think that they would want you to have as many good deeds as possible, so they'd give you a huge pocket.
Well, I mean, it's a figurative pocket. If I actually stored my good deeds in here, it would explode.
Okay, keep in mind this part. It's a reminder to have good thoughts, words, and deeds.
There's also this.
Check this
Shoelace.
out.
No, it's not. It's a kasti. I'm wearing one as well.
Look at that. What does that look like? If you're in the Torah community, what does that look like? It looks like tzitzit.
You tie your kasti around your waist.
And is it the same for men and women?
It's the same for men and women. Well, I mean, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
It's just out of respect, but you can hold it.
Okay.
It's like a sadra. A kasti is there to protect you and to guide you as well.
And to end the ceremony, this coconut and bouquet of flowers are given to the girls as a symbol of balance, future prosperity, and as an emblem of good luck.
All their family members who are women are going to help them get dressed for the celebrations after. Yeah, they've officially become Zoroastrians.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And they get to feel like a little princess. I love it. That's beautiful. So, okay, this is what they believe the prophet looked like, but no one really knows for sure. Very interesting. Long beard and mustache with long hair. And he's doing this symbol, which is funny because you always see in like the Catholic imagery of Jesus, he's doing this. But from Zoroastrian perspective, it is pointing to that there is only one deity.
Soon, these young girls will
You were not put on this planet to work for money. Money is meant to work for you. And unless you
Believe it or not, this old English-looking house is home to one of the most sacred and ancient Zoroastrian symbols on the planet.
Fire.
A fire that represents an everlasting flame that's been
An everlasting flame. Okay, and this fire is sacred, not the fire itself. They're not worshiping the fire itself. But anyway, what verse comes to my mind is that Yahuwah is an all-consuming fire. I'm gonna try and skip through a lot of this. Are they taking... Oh yeah, they're taking their shoes off.
Ceremonies.
So let's go into the prayer room. There's two things that we need to do. We need to cover our heads and take off our shoes.
Now, my mother always told me
Okay, and then he just tries to make a goofy joke, and it's just kind of whatever. Alright, here you have their sacred...
No, you can't step
prayer.
in there, Tevya. But
And it's like
we
in
can
a... This looks like a giant Kiddush cup.
talk about it from out here.
Wow, this is incredible. Now, is this burning 24 hours a day?
Well, not here, but in a consecrated fire temple back in India or in Iran, it would burn 24 hours a day. In fact, it's an ever-burning fire. But if you look at the back there, there is a flame.
Yeah.
That is an ever-burning flame. It's on 24/7, 365 days a year. And it represents symbolically the light of God.
The light of Yahuwah, like in the form of a burning bush, maybe? Alright, I have a couple pictures that I wanted to go over. Zoroastrianism at its peak. The Zoroastrian Achaemenid Empire at its greatest extent was the largest empire in recorded history at 3.0 million square miles in 400 BC. Under Cyrus's rule, it extended approximately from Macedonia, now Greece, into the west to the Indus River in India in the east, from the Caucasus Mountains of Russia in the north to Egypt in the south. And look, right here we have the Scythians. And the Scythians right here, these are the Caucasus Mountains. This is around like Georgia. Man. Okay, born somewhere between 2000 BC and to 600 BC during Bronze Age, Zarathustra. Born in northeast ancient Iran, today Kazakhstan or Tajikistan. Family of priests, he too was a priest, married with 6 children. When 30 years old, he received a vision, was 42 when came before the court of King Vashtaspa of Bactria, accepted the religion, and it spread far and wide, and died in his late 70s. Okay, if they're saying Bactria, that's right here on this map. All the way over here. Zarathustra was an ancient prophet who may have lived in Central Asia sometime between 1800 and 600 BC. Okay. They believe he lived in what is now eastern Iran or Afghanistan. Zarathustra was known to the ancient Greeks, who called him Zoroaster. Zarathustra belonged to a priestly family and was raised in the ancient Indo-Iranian tradition, which was closely related to the Vedic religion. And here's a quote from him. As long as I have power and am able, I shall teach all to seek for truth and right. I would agree with that statement. Good deed, good thought, good word. The way in the world is just one, and that way is truth. That's in alignment with what I believe too, and it's also in alignment with what the Messiah said. I am the way and the truth and the life. But see, he's not saying that he is that. He's pointing the way. Here's another quote. All flows out from the deity and all must be absorbed in him again. I don't disagree with that. That sounds about right. Here's something that's very interesting too. Look, this is a picture of the Angra Mainyu. It looks like everybody's depiction of Satan with the horns on his head. I wanted to share something else. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it because I had a little bit of trouble looking for it earlier. But this image right here, I've actually seen... Oh, La Malak, belonging to the king. because when they use that lamed right here, it's a possessory, means it belongs to the malak for the king, belongs to the king. And look at this, it's like an eagle. That kind of looks similar. Where is a picture? Oh, I had it right here. Not quite. Not as... Like, here's some other things. So I had to put this backwards because they didn't... They had the writing backwards, and I was trying to decipher what this says. And here we have the lamed again, so it says la, a, shan, ashana, ashana, o, bar, achaz, achaz. And I think that what it actually says on there is this belongs to Ashana, the servant or scribe of Ahaz, the king. But it has these Egyptian, look, this is a sun disk, these horns like a ox, and these two snakes on either side. It's got the Egyptian influence. And that kind of brings me to this one right here. This is really interesting too. So someone went ahead and made a chronological plot of the seals. So you can see the earliest seals have these Egyptian symbols. This looks like an Egyptian scribe standing here. They've got the winged scarab on the top. This is during the reign of Uzziah. Then during Jeroboam II, we've got the lion. During Hosea's time, this is, I saw on another image, they were explaining this. So you have a scribe, and he's holding this papyrus reed in his hand. But during Ahaz, you've got this little Egyptian thing. This is the one we just looked at. Then with Hezekiah, you've got these winged scarabs still. But then look down here. And Josiah is one of my favorites. No more Egyptian or other influences from other nations. That just Paleo-Hebrew on all of the seals. And then, a couple generations after, Babylonian exile. And this is when that Paleo-Hebrew language was turned into a more Babylonian square script that looks like today's Hebrew. So anyway. Chaldean. Okay. Check this out. From Chaldea. This is where Chaldea is. This is like a map. Here we have Uruk, Larsa, Eridu. This is the Euphrates and the Tigris. Nippur, Babylon, Sippar, Alright, Chaldea was a small country that existed between the late 10th or early 9th and mid-6th centuries BC, after which the country and its people were absorbed and assimilated into the indigenous population of Babylonia. Semitic speaking, it was located in the marshy land of the far southeastern corner of Mesopotamia and briefly came to rule Babylon. The Hebrew Bible uses the term Kazdim, and this is translated as Chaldeans in the Greek Old Testament, although there is some dispute as to whether Kazdim in fact means Chaldean or refers to the South Mesopotamian Chaldu. During a period of weakness in the East Semitic-speaking kingdom of Babylonia, new tribes of West Semitic-speaking migrants arrived in the region from the Levant between the 11th and 9th centuries BC. The earliest waves consisted of Suteans and Arameans, following a century or so later by the Chaldeu, a group who became known later as the Chaldeans or the Chaldee. It's actually Kazdi, as we can find out later. The name Chaldea is a Latinization of the Greek Chaldea, a Hellenization of Akkadian, or Kaldu or Kazdu, and suggesting an underlying Kaldu. Okay, I don't know why it says that. The name appears in Hebrew in the Bible as Kazdim and in Aramaic Kazdi. In the Bible, the name Kased, the singular form of Kazdim, meaning Chaldeans. Kased is identified as son of Abraham's brother Nahor and brother of Kemuel, the father of Aram, residing in Aram Naharaim. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus also links Arpachshad and Chaldea in his Antiquities of the Jews, stating Arpachshad named the Arpachshadites, who are now called Chaldeans. Let me see if I can. Mene. Ur. Kazdi. Okay, let's go to this word. Kazdi. Kazdima. Occasionally shown as the second form of enclitic, meaning towards the Kazdites. Patronymic from H3777, only in the plural. Kased, from an unusual root of uncertain meaning, Kased, a relative of Abraham. Chesed, okay, that's interesting because the word chesed means loving kindness. A Kazdite or descendant of Chesed, by implication a Chaldean, as if so descended, also an astrologer, as if proverbial of that people, into Chaldea. It's descendant of Kased, by implication also an astrologer, Chaldeans, Chaldees, inhabitants of Chaldea. Abraham was raised with this knowledge in the land of Ur. And there's a total of 81 occurrences of this. Only one occurrence of this chesed. Anyway, that's where Abraham was from. Or should I say Abram? Because that was what he was known for at that time. This is all just very interesting. They had one language. Will you arise and let me baptize you to wash away your sins so I can stamp you with God's seal on your forehead? Wow. I've never heard of this concept. That is interesting though. To literally be sealed on your forehead with a ring. That makes sense to me. Why not? The only thing is that this is it's symbolic because you know that whatever the imprint is, it'll actually go away, because anytime you like imprint into your flesh, eventually it goes back. But the seal that we're going to be given is one that's like spiritual, and It's permanent. Will be. All right, here we go. We're going to tie it up with Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of Yahuwah, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The law of Yahuwah is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of Yahuwah is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of Yahuwah are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of Yahuwah is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Yahuwah is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of Yahuwah are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping of them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me, then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Yahuwah, my strength and my redeemer. So this to me says pretty much the same thing we've just been talking about. Good thoughts would be the meditation of your heart, because a lot of times when they're talking about your heart, they're actually talking about your brain. And let the words of my mouth be acceptable. Okay, that means good words. Good words, good thoughts. May they be righteous and acceptable to our Almighty. And with that, I'm going to end this video. And I hope that that some of y'all gleaned something new that you didn't know before. And with that, I bid thee well. Yahuwah Baruch Atah.